Drivers, start your engines!
Pick the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweaty working for the man, alright. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save a baby from the burning building. Take her home and put the sleepless on, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey race fans, welcome to the Whoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour or perhaps more as we discuss everything racing from this past weekend. Before we get into that, let me introduce you to the panel I have assembled for you tonight. With me as always, Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress Racing. Gray, how are you tonight?
Good evening, guys.
Great to have you here, Gray. Joey Barnes, writer for IndyCar.com and managing editor at Motorsports Tribune, is in the house as well. Joey, you're all riled up and ready to chat tonight, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And speaking of riled up and ready to chat, Mr. Richard Uden, also from Richard Childress Motorsports, is here with us. Richard Childress Racing, always want to get your team name wrong. But, Richard, how you doing this evening?
I'm very good, thank you. Hope everybody else is good, too.
All right, so this weekend we had a NASCAR Monster Energy Series at Charlotte. The Petit Le Mans was run down in Road Atlanta, where we saw the debut of the Penske Acura team. And Formula One was over in Japan for the Japanese Grand Prix. So let's start off with Charlotte. No new news. Martin Truex wins again. Not as dominating fashion as we saw him the last time I remember winning at Charlotte, but a good run for Truex. I mean, his sixth win of the year. That team continues to soldier on and really set the standard for the rest of the guys there. So, Gray, what are your thoughts coming out of Charlotte here?
Yeah, Charlotte was sort of a strange weekend. Was affected by a little bit of weather. The Xfinity race was delayed, and of course the Cup race ran under a cloud the whole time. We didn't know if we were going to even get it off, and it looked like Monday or Tuesday at one time might be the best days to run the race. But the weather broke, and they were able to get the race in. Very poor crowd there. I think Charlotte has been challenged with attendance over the last couple of years, but I think too that the weather hurt a lot of their walk-up crowd this particular time, because it was looked rather ominous throughout the morning and during the early part of the race. Looked like it would rain any minute, but they were fortunate enough to be able to get it in. It was again, like you said, another Martin Truex show. Martin's just proven that team is the class of the field this year. There was their sixth win of the season. They didn't do it, as you said, in dominating fashion, but and they started about 17th, and they had to climb through the field, and they eventually worked their way to the front by the end. I think they made their way in well inside the top five by the end of the second stage, and then he really asserted himself in the last stage and took the lead, and essentially, for the most part, was unchallenged the rest of the way. Good runs for some guys there. Kevin Harvick ran pretty strong there. He led the most laps of the race. I think he led 4 times for about 149 laps, far more than anybody, and looked at times to have the dominant car. He faded a little bit in the final stage of the race. Ended up finishing third. Good run for Chase Elliott. He finished second in all 3 stages and second overall. during the race. And in fact, the top 7 cars in the race were all current playoff contenders. So, and then we had Kyle Busch suffer some misfortune. He hit the wall and then had several spins after that. He damaged the deck lid on his car and made it a handful to drive, I'm sure, for the remainder of the race. But he did soldier on and did finish the race some 4 to 6 laps down. So he's got some ground to make up.
Kyle
in the next race.
Kyle had a really tough day. After they damaged the car, I'm not sure exactly why, but he was getting a higher level of carbon monoxide in there, and it was hot to begin with at the race.
It knocked the crush panels out of the car.
Right. So
when you suffer damage like that, and obviously that the carbon monoxide and the exhaust fumes was seeping up into the interior of the car. So yeah, that's sometimes that's a tough thing to do. And then too, his car, he lacked a lot of downforce because he pretty much knocked the deck lid askew, and of course that moved the spoiler over, and the car was a handful. There was one major incident in the race early on with about 40 laps in. Ryan Newman and Clint Boyer got together coming off turn 2 and crashed, and that ended Ryan Newman's day, in which probably they had a little bit of promise for the 31 car. They had been running pretty good throughout practice and qualifying, had a decent starting spot, and we're expecting a good run that day. But again, there we go. Martin Truex really, he asserted himself again, and he's, put it out there that the 78 team is going to be the team to beat. With the win, they solidly advanced to the next stage of the playoffs, and we'll go to Talladega for the second race of this stage. And we all know Talladega is a wild card, and you can expect anything there. So, all bets are off when they go there. We're just going to have to see, what strategy each of these playoff teams decide to play. Or some of them going to be conservative and just try to survive, or others going to go in and try to stay up front all day and steal a win. So, Charlotte, like you said, there was one controversy out of Charlotte. I guess everybody saw that with the Jimmy Johnson pit stop, where and a lot of drivers and fans have spoken out about that. Typically, when you pit outside of your pit box and work is done on the car, it's a penalty. It's a 1 lap penalty. You have to come back to the pit area and sit in the pits for 1 lap before you can return to the track. In this instance, Jimmy Johnson came down the track. They had a tire change, and they didn't get all the lug nuts on. As he pulled away from pit road, Chad told Jimmy to stop. The nose of the car, in fact, the whole front of the car was in the next pit forward, and the tire changer went out and tightened, made sure the lug nuts were tightened. NASCAR chose not to penalize Jimmy Johnson, saying that it was a safety issue and that Jimmy was serving a penalty of sorts because he stopped anyway and had to extend the service on the car. So it's kind of, the rule book says one thing, and NASCAR kind of, says, well, we've discussed this earlier on, and this is how we decided to do it. And it's caused a little bit of furor this week, in some of the discussions. And of course, there again, the one thing consistent about NASCAR is inconsistency. So
I was just going to say that, Gray, but you beat me to it.
That's just one other story coming out of it. And Richard, did you hear of any penalties come out of NASCAR today?
There's 3 penalties that I saw coming from this weekend. I believe 2 for Joe Gibbs backed cars. One in Xfinity and one in the Cup. It was, let me just check this. Sorry, it's the 19 car. Earlier I said off air that it was the 20, but in fact it's the 19 car had lug nuts not properly installed. That old favourite. $10,000 fine for the crew chief, which will probably be paid by the team. They probably, it's a silly penalty because at the end of the day, you've got to work out, if you only put 4 lug nuts on, that could save you a period of time on pit road, and that can win you a race. That's worth a lot more than $10,000. Anyway, I guess from Graham and myself, our point of interest on the Xfinity side of things, where we had 2 cars in the playoffs, and Hemrick is comfortably into the next round of the playoffs. But Brendan Gaughan was playing catch up, and one of the guys he was racing against was Matt Tifft in the 19 car. Post race, they actually found that that they failed on inspection height, and they had an encumbered finish. Although that was only deduction of 10 driver points and 10 owner points. And he had, I think he was 16 points ahead of Brendan Gaughan, so he still gets through on a 6-point cushion there. But a little bit unclear exactly again as to what encumbered means and how they police those regulations. And then the 11 car as well, who was also in the playoffs, Blake Koch. They had a very, very difficult day. Unfortunately, they had a steering pump issue, and they actually did an incredible job to get the car back onto the lead lap in the final sector of the Xfinity race. But they had the similar penalty as well.
And oh, by the way, Ryan Blaney won that Xfinity race in pretty much dominant fashion. So that pretty much puts the wrap on Charlotte.
So
and of course, that was the last. One further thing before we move on. That was the last race, the last fall race on the oval at Charlotte. Next year's fall race will move to the road course.
And if anybody saw the TV coverage of either of the practice sessions on Friday, that is all they talked about on TV. I mean, it was almost embarrassing. It was like, did anybody mention there's a road course there next year? Obviously, they're trying to sell it quite hard, and there's a test coming up there. I believe the test's next week or the week after. They've made some changes from what the original design was to put that chicane on just before the start-finish line, and then they're also putting a chicane on the back stretch as well. So it has changed a little bit from what the original drawings were, but hopefully it'll be it looks like a decent lap, and people
it looks decent, but they were so excited about the artificial turf down there too. It's like,
so
it's like, okay, so what? This is.
You
this
can
is
tell,
news, but you know what? I hope it helps them out, because the attendance at the October race has been well behind the 600 for a number of years, and it just seems to have dwindled, despite being in the chase. So maybe the road course will spice it up. Maybe folks want to come out and kind of see what that looks like. Right there in the heart of oval racing country, we don't see a lot of road racing down there. So I'm interested to see it. I don't know.
The novelty aspect of it will carry them for several years.
Sure,
several years, and of course, I'll go. I mean, I'll go just to see what it's all about, and I think a lot of other fans will too. So we'll just have to wait and see how that experiment works out.
Yeah. So we're headed to Talladega, which is an elimination round, and the 4 guys at the bottom of the order heading into Talladega are, from bottom to top, Ricky Stenhouse, Ryan Blaney, Brad Keselowski, and Matt Kenseth. And only 1 point above the cut line, 3 points above the cut line, is Jamie McMurray. Again, Talladega's a wild card, man. Any one of these guys can. It's not an elimination race?
No, it's not. They moved it.
They swapped Kansas.
Yeah, so Kansas will be the elimination race. They didn't want to have Talladega because of the nature of racing there, being a wild card. They did not want that to be the elimination race because it has so many, big wreck can have so many ramifications. So they moved it back and swapped dates with Kansas. So, but Talladega is what it is. It can be a race where it can ruin a top contender's chances, and it can take someone that is on the outside looking in and boost their chances. So, it's like I said, it's a crapshoot every time they go there, and when we know that it's going there. So, like I said, teams are going to come up with all different strategies on how they want to run it. You're going to see some guys fall back and play a waiting game. They'll ride at the back, staying out of trouble, and then hopefully make a charge at the end. You'll see other guys decide to go for broke and do what they've got to do. And it's going to be interesting because you've got several guys. You mentioned Jamie McMurray just on the inside transferring. That's a good track for Jamie. Jamie's a good restrictor plate racer. Brad Keselowski's a great restrictor plate racer.
Yeah, Brad's
got
a couple big wins at Talladega. Yeah.
He sure does.
And
Ricky
of course,
Stenhouse. Yeah, Stenhouse. We know he's won 2 of the 3 previous plate races this year already. So a lot of guys there, in the mix to do well there. And then you've got Kyle Busch. We know what he's capable of. So we're just going to have to see. And you got what does Truex do? Does he go conservative? He's already transferred into the next round. Does he say, okay, we're not going to take any chances of getting hurt or anything? If it falls our way, we'll take it, but we're not going to press the issue if it doesn't. So he's in a great situation right now. He already knows he's in the next round. So really he can go in pretty comfortable into this race, and the pressure's on the rest of these guys to do well and also not to do bad.
Exactly, yeah. So do we want to make some picks for Talladega before we talk about some other little NASCAR driver news and things here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Joey, you want the first pick?
I mean, I guess so.
For Talladega, yeah.
I mean, aside from hearing Dale Jr. one last time 30 times this year, I'm not going to pick Dale Jr. I actually like Ryan Blaney. Ford seems to have a restrictor plate package that really plays to their liking, and I don't think Ricky Stenhouse continues his reign of winning on restrictor plate, so I'm going to go ahead and say Blaney.
That's a good pick.
That's a good pick, yeah. Now, Richard, what are your feelings?
Apart from maybe that Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s restrictor plate doesn't quite restrict as much as some of the others. So just putting that out there, I'm going to go for Brad Keselowski.
Okay, well, you just stole my pick, so... So, Gray, who do you like?
I'll go last. You go. You always take the last pick. You go.
Okay, well, I was going to go with Brad Keselowski just based on the fact that he runs really well at Talladega. And then for some reason I had in my head it was an elimination round. And I was just remembering, the chase a couple of years ago. I believe it was 2014 where it was elimination round and Brad was just about out of it. And he won that Talladega race and kept himself alive for the next round. But I will go with Matt Kenseth for this round here.
With how much Brad Keselowski gets picked on this show, you would think that he would be like a 7-time champion and have 100 wins because, my goodness, he gets picked by everybody on this show. Yeah,
I know. And you would think the Dallas Cowboys would have won 5 Super Bowls in the last 20 years, but they haven't either, so...
Is that your way of saying is that your way of saying that maybe Brad's overrated?
Huh?
Is that your way of saying Brad's overrated?
No, I would never say Brad's overrated. No, I heard the same thing about, I'd say the Dallas Cowboys thing, because we were just talking about Dale Earnhardt Jr., and it goes back to good old Kevin Harvick said, well, the NASCAR's ratings are down because their most popular driver doesn't win, and I think, Dallas Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl in 2 decades, and that hasn't hurt the NFL. So, but I digress. And Gray, who's your pick?
I'm going to say, Talladega can always come with surprises, and I'm going to stick with the surprise theme. I'm going to say Chase Elliott picks up his first win there. Hendrick cars are notorious good at Talladega, and I'm going to say Chase is going to position himself and come up to win. I mean, he's in the he's solidly in the playoffs, but I still think it would be somewhat of a surprise if he picks up his first win there.
Yeah, and he's run so strong over the last several weeks. I mean, he's got how many runner-up finishes? A bunch of them. So it'd be nice to see him, get that monkey off his back, get his first win.
We did talk about it a couple of weeks ago now. Is he the most place finishes without or tied second place finishes in NASCAR now without a win?
I think Kyle Larson still got him by a little bit there.
Okay.
I thought Harry Gant had that record by.
I was going to say Harry Gant, yeah.
But I bet you, who was our guest that we had on the show the other night that had all the stats? Well, I bet he, all the last place finishers. I bet he could tell us.
I bet he would know. Yeah.
Lastcar.com.
Yeah. So now there's a story about Landon Castle that somebody wants to jump in and talk about.
Yeah. So he's not. He's been announced or confirmed by Front Row Motorsports that he's not going to be returning next year. So, personally, I don't know why, because I just, for me, I think he's one of the few guys that's still young enough. He's social media savvy. He's sponsor friendly. He's probably everything you would want. And he's like, well, we look at Joey Logano and say, oh man, he's still young. He's run all these races and he's got all this potential and he's great with sponsors. That's everything that technically Landon Castle is too, but he's just never been given a shot in a top-tier ride. You're looking at a kid that's 28 years old, got 250-plus starts in the Cup Series right now, and just kind of running down this list here. Phoenix Racing, TRG Motorsports, Gunzelman Motorsports, Germain Racing, BK Racing, Circle Sport, Hillman, Front Row. Those are the teams that he's run with throughout his career in Cup. And it's kind of a sad deal because he's taken Front Row Motorsports and consistently given them mid-20 place finishes, and sometimes at places like Daytona and Talladega able to put them as high as 11th. Something that you typically aren't going to be able to do in Front Row Motorsports. So for me personally, I look at the free agent market and I see Danica and I see Matt Kenseth, I see Bubba Wallace, and then I see Landon Castle, and I'm looking at this saying I'm either going to want Bubba or I'm either going to want Landon Castle, because those are two guys. Bubba made the most of his opportunity earlier this year, the brief time that he got. Landon hasn't really been given his fair shake. He was actually a victim of the economy situation back when we had that problem in 2000, I think it was 2008. He was a Hendrick development driver, went into Richmond and did really well. But because of that whole situation with the economy and GM kind of doing what they did with falling under, he became a victim of that. And that's what left him kind of out in the rain, so to speak, and left kind of going from ride to ride, back marker to back marker, if you will. And he's never really been given that opportunity or fair shake. I think he's someone that certainly warrants a look. If we can go and look at Alex Bowman, who I believe, and have believed for a long time, has had a lot of talent, there's no reason to think we couldn't do the same thing here with Landon Castle.
I agree. It's a shame that he's been cast in that journeyman kind of situation that he's in. But the stark reality of our sport right now is, unless you can bring money to a team, you are on the outside looking in. And even with these empty rides right now, and of course we talked about the 27 being first and foremost an empty ride. That's going to be filled, but it's probably going to be filled with someone who can bring a deal to the team. I agree. I think Landon Castle deserves a shot. I believe he looked at his current situation. He had a ride. I'm sure Front Row would have desired to keep him in that situation. But I think he kind of looked at it and said, hey, I've got to do something right, wrong, or indifferent to further my career. And he stepped away without any security, without any safety net. So unless he knows something that we don't. But I think at this point in time, he felt like he had to do something different to get a shot, at the brass ring. And it may be that he'll step away. He could step away from the current ride he's in and maybe step down into a competitive Xfinity ride and kind of resurrect his career down there and get a shot at getting a Cup ride.
Yeah,
that would be my guess.
I tell you what makes sense is that looks like the perfect scenario for a place like JR Motorsports, who seems to do that time after time.
You read my mind. I was thinking the same thing, that he would be ideal, an ideal driver for Junior Motorsports to come in and get some seat time in one of those cars, and he'd give it a good ride. And obviously, he'd be with a competitive team that would give him a shot to win and a shot to shine.
What's funny about this is I put out a tweet yesterday, and I hate to resort to Twitter on anything, but I put out something where I thought Furniture Road Racing, even though they recently announced that we already sold our charter for the current Eric Jones team, because Eric Jones is going to the 20 next year, and they put out the possibility at the time that if we need a charter to have a second team, we could go ahead and easily buy one. And so I kind of put out the tweet, like, Furniture Road Racing should really look at this. There's a lot to like about Castle and Trill as a team and a lineup. You want to talk about something to build around, because clearly the engines are the same as Joe Gibbs Racing, but clearly they're doing better jobs with their body and chassis Furniture Row if they're outrunning them each and every week, it seems like. So when I was sitting there looking at that, and I thought it was great, what was so funny about it is that there was more tweets put out today. I think Furniture Row had to put out something else where they actually officially confirmed we were going to be a one-car team next year. So it was more than just me kind of on that Landon Castle bandwagon to Furniture Row Racing, so much so that they felt like they needed to put out a little memo to everybody saying that we're exclusively a one-car outfit next year, which, that's a shame.
Are you suggesting that you started that rumor then?
I did not probably start that rumor. I will never take credit for starting rumors on things like that. But if that's the case, then cool. But if not, then, I won't take credit.
There you go.
Next, and I tell you one thing, just briefly before we move on to another topic here. Charlotte is usually, and when we got to Charlotte in October, Charlotte, being it's in the mecca of stock racing, was always a big week for announcements in October. There would be rollouts and announcements made for the upcoming year, and there was virtually nothing this week other than it was announced that Matt Tifft is going to drive at RCR next year. And Richard, you can allude to that. I was out of town when all that went down, but you can fill us in on that.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an unusual announcement, really. I don't know many people saw that. I mean, a chase driver there, a competitive rider in the Xfinity Series with Joe Gibbs to swap. Interesting concept there. We don't know. Is it Joe Gibbs, relieving him of a drive, or he made the choice to step over to RCR. But there's no doubt that, in the Xfinity Series, our cars are probably a fair thing to say, more competitive than they are at Cup level. So hopefully he can come in, do a job. I think we are an organisation losing, as RCR as an organisation, losing at least two of our Xfinity cars, which is a shame, because there's a really good bunch of people that work on those cars, and we'll see where it goes from there. But I think it's a good move. It's always nice when you get a bit of fresh blood in there and see what we can do with him next year.
And I guess now we can finally put Charlotte to bed.
Let's put Charlotte to bed. Yes. So Ibsen was down there in Road Atlanta for the Petit Le Mans, and we saw the debut of the Penske Acura cars there. They finished P3, with three of their IndyCar drivers there: Montoya, Castroneves, and Pagenaud. Only one of those three will be in their full-time lineup next year. The race was won by the Nissan team. Scott Sharp, Brendan Hartley, who's been hotly rumored for the second Ganassi seat in IndyCar, and Ryan Daziel. So But just on that note there, Elio was there was this whole on again. Is he going to be in IndyCar next year? Is he not? It's confirmed that he'll be with this Acura program full time next year. We'll see him at the 500. Montoya also committed to this Acura program. Evidently, there's not going to be a Penske car for him at the 500, but Roger has let him know that he's free to seek another ride for the 500. Now, Joey, you and I were talking off the air earlier that this may somehow void his IMSA contract or whatnot. But if he's got Roger's blessing to do this, just help me understand this.
Well, that's mostly me just speculating. I'll put that out there first and foremost. I personally don't see how this makes any sense on how this could happen in 2018, but yet he couldn't go out there and search for something similar for 2017. If that, he was sitting on the sidelines all of 2017, and I don't understand why, he couldn't go run a full season championship for somebody else in IndyCar instead of just on the sidelines the entire year, because clearly we've seen Elio go from full season championship straight into the Acura program because the IndyCar schedule is pretty spaced out. There's not nearly as many races as, say, an IndyCar as a NASCAR. There's 17 rounds. Mixed in with testing, you're maybe doing 25 to 30 different things throughout the entire season. So I didn't understand why in 2017 he was so held back. But in 2018, he's free to go and do what he wishes. But yet he's committed now to a full season in IMSA. So,
well, he's, from what I understand, he's free to seek a ride for the 500. Not free to seek a full-time IndyCar gig, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I get that, but I'm saying, what prevented the opportunity? And I gather this: you can go and race the GP and the 500 with Team Penske, or you could, or you can go get a full season commitment with another team and potentially kiss your IMSA opportunity goodbye. And I hate it because we lost a chance to have Montoya in the champion for the full year, which would have been a lot of fun. Because last year he was, 2 years ago he was blazing fast. Last year he's just a victim of a lot of bad luck, and I just don't quite understand the economics of that situation, especially now when Penske said we're not going to run 5 cars, we're going to run 4. Elio's going to run the GP in the 500. He's going to be this year's Montoya, or next year's Montoya, I should say. And I say this, their Acura program looks really stout with the announcement that Graham Rahal's also going to be doing some stuff on the endurance side whenever they're doing the Rolex 24. And
Ricky Taylor as well, yeah. So
yeah, IMSA champion this year, Ricky Taylor. So, which is big because Ricky Taylor is one of those guys that, if I recall, it was him that was getting some opportunities testing an IndyCar with Penske last year at some places. That was kind of an under-the-radar thing, but I wish that some of these IMSA guys were looked at a little bit more, especially ones single-seater ladder, because too often we see these Mazda Road to Indy guys not get IndyCar opportunities and they go race in IMSA or WEC, But I look at something like this where the Taylor brothers really haven't had the chance. They went kind of the opposite direction. So to see the fact that they're young, they're marketable, obviously still very quick in whatever you put them in. I think it's kind of a shame that a NASCAR team doesn't look at them if possible, but at the same time, maybe they don't have interest to go NASCAR racing because they get tired of left-hand corners. But I think that, through it all, to find a situation where one of those Taylor brothers are with Penske is brilliant. And you add that Dane Cameron to the mix with Montoya and Castroneves, Pagano's mixed in on the endurance side as well. That is a very formidable lineup right off the bat, and they showed obviously with P3 in their debut that they're here to do some serious business, and it's going to definitely kick off solidly for them the Rolex 24 next year.
Right, and they pretty much were class of the field in qualifying in the warm up. They had a couple of problems early in the race, but still rallied back to P3. So I'd just be interested to see where Juan Montoya ends up for the 500 if he pursues that. He hasn't said that he's going to, but he said it sure would be a lot of fun. But heck, if you were an IndyCar owner and had an extra chassis Wouldn't you love to have Montoya in your car? You know, a third Schmidt car maybe, or a seventh Andretti car, or you know what I mean?
But if you're Roger, do you really like? I know you're saying that, but do you really want that? Because Montoya is a pretty big bullet, no matter where he goes.
Oh, exactly. Montoya even said that. He says, "Yeah, I'm surprised Roger's going to let me do this because I'm pretty good and I might go there and beat him." So,
or maybe
I'm not convinced that Roger may not at some point between now and May go ahead and get that fifth car for JPM at Indy. But and I just wonder if it's a matter of chassis availability with the with the new package for 2018. It's just a thought. But
Ganassi's already said he's going to field how many
two
cars?
Just two, yep.
Yeah.
Just two. I think with if he's got extra equipment around, I think he's a definite possibility for rolling out additional rides for the Indy 500. I think we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. But I tell you, if we've got this much talent out there on the sidelines and they can bring some money to the thing, we could have a really strong field at Indy next year, and by that I mean we get back to the bump day situation where we could have 35, 36, 37 cars trying to get into the field.
I expect with teams like Andretti probably rolling out 6 cars, Penske rolling out the extra car for sure. Ganassi, I expect to roll out another one. There's no telling with Ray Hall and Schmidt what might come. But then you add Carlin to potentially. You add Juncos to the mix. You add Gabby Chavez's team to the mix. Name escapes me.
Harding Racing.
Harding Racing. Thank you. I look at this as we're going to have a natural bump day for the first time in a while.
Oh, sure, I do too.
I expect 35 probably over under.
And with Indy,
in 2019, I expect maybe 37. Sorry.
I wouldn't doubt. I tell you, with Indy's recent run of success, with the race being just brilliant, I think it's a sponsor's dream, and I think they won't have any trouble selling that race for these additional rides because the exposure's there. I mean, you get a month, you get almost a season's of exposure in 1 month there. So
that's part of why the GP was so critical, is because that you can sell it as a package deal to a sponsor. The thing is that let's say the average IndyCar season costs a team $10 million. You're probably looking at a third of that budget alone, maybe even almost close to half per team getting hit in just the month of May because of how much is used to massage those cars out, the wind tunnel, the shaker rigs, etc., the manpower. There's a lot that goes into that race, even though it's in their backyard.
But there's a lot of bang for that buck too in the amount of exposure during the month of May.
Oh, absolutely, and
TV ratings, yeah.
And the thing I like that IndyCar is doing, there was a thing put out by Racer earlier this week. They're kind of looking at the virtual reality and the AR versions of things whenever this digital era kind of continues to go forward. And I like the fact that they're the ones that are looking at, if we're not going to have all our practices on, say, a network, then why not stream it themselves? Because IMS has their own production company. With IMS Productions, they can go ahead and we can stream practices. We can do this and that. We can stream them on Twitter and Facebook and other forums, doing everything through there. So they're finding ways to market themselves out to people in a manner that kind of gets the new crowd, so to speak, this new age of trying to get the 20-somethings. They're finding ways to do that because not everybody just sits in front of a TV anymore.
Well, remember last year when Alonso drove his practice days? They had more people watching the practice days than the Phoenix race. More people watching Alonso practice than an actual race.
Right, they had hits from all over the world watching the practice session. I sat at my desk. Richard, you came. We sat in my office and watched part of it. That day, and then of course.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. I mean, we didn't do that.
No. You were working, right?
Yeah, we had it running on. We had it running in the background. But
I got you.
Seriously, Indy, they do a good job at IMS with their package that was streaming all the practices throughout the month of May, because I mean they're there every day, and you can watch it. They do a great job with it. And you're right. There's a lot they can sell going forward, particularly with the Indy 500 is its own animal. Let's face it.
I want to put something out there, and this is probably the last IndyCar thing I care to touch on, because there's not a lot we can touch on as of yet. But after the show, after we did the podcast last week, there was some announcement that came out Wednesday. The Elio Castroneves announcement was one of those that we kind of missed out on whenever the show went to air the following day. So I kind of wanted to just do a brief scope on Elio. 20 years of IndyCar. I know he never got that championship, but and he's still on that quest for number 4, tying Jay Foyt and Rick Mears. I think that for me personally, he's kind of the era when I started watching IndyCar racing, which I know is a lot later than some people on the show, but all things in consideration, the late 90s, the 96, 97, when Elio started to come up, paying attention and gravitating towards his personality from then all the way to now. It's just amazing to see how he's grown into a guy who's got 30 wins, 50 poles, four second place finishes, 2 of those with Scott Dixon. When you really think about this, I know he's not going to go down as a guy that won a championship, but I think Scott Dixon said it best to me last month in Sonoma. He's like, in order to win the championship, you have to go through him. And to me, in my book, I mean, that says enough right there to say that guy is certainly one of the champions of the sport, even though he never claimed an Astor Cup.
That's and we look at Dale Jr. as NASCAR's most popular driver. I for years I have looked at Elio as IndyCar's most popular driver. Would you agree to that?
I would. I think it'll be interesting to see who the next ambassador is, because James Hinchcliffe has got this awesome personality, and then obviously Joseph Newgarden, a young American who just claimed the championship, and is somebody that, honestly, when you see what he's over here Instagramming about playing Forza and challenging people to come beat him. I mean, so he's the common gamer kid of today, but he still gets in a race car and is as competitive as ever, marketable as all hell, and I think when you really look at modern day Rick Mears in some respects, I think when we see where this sport is going, the decisions are being made are the right decisions. The way they're going about it is methodical, and I think that it'll be interesting to see, who takes that mantle for the next ambassador. Is it Hinchcliffe? Is it maybe a Graham Rahal? Is it a Newgarden? Or is it somebody maybe that's an Indy Lights that hasn't quite risen up to the ranks yet? I think that's going to be very interesting, and I think that I think the 2018 Universal Aero Kit is going to have a lot to say about who's going to be on that springboard moving into the next 10 years of the sport.
Whoever steps into Elio's role, is going to have some big shoes to fill, because Elio has that charisma, that just attracts people to the sport.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, with that being said, we had a Formula 1 race in Japan that was on at the middle of the night Saturday. I know I was up watching it. Joey, Richard, I'm sure you guys were burning the midnight oil, brewing a pot of coffee, watching that race too. So
it's my normal time.
That's right. Yeah, you're a night owl. Yeah. So, but Lewis Hamilton, dominating performance again. Shared the podium with the 2 Red Bull cars. Kimi was 4th. Vettel.
Fifth.
Vettel, who's 4th?
Bottas.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
it's okay. We'll let that slide. You
gotta let me slide on the Colin Talladega elimination round, man. I'm just like, I should prepare more for this show. So, all right, and Vettel was way down the finishing order. So, with no further ado, Joey, Richard, talk us through the Japanese Grand Prix.
I think that for the 3rd race in a row, we were watching Ferrari implode. You look at Singapore, obviously, was kind of a self-inflicted from a driver's point of view. But from an engineering standpoint, we've seen a mechanical standpoint, actually, more than anything. We've seen the last 2 races, Malaysia and now in Japan, where the cars had been hit in some way. And for a while, it was, what was it, cracked headers was the apparent problem in Malaysia. And now we've got faulty spark plugs, and they had lead up to the grid. They couldn't get to Vettel's spark plug to change it out. They thought they did. The newscasters thought they did, and then we found out later that they actually didn't get a chance to change it out. It would have taken too much time. He got 5 laps in before he retired, and second retirement next to Carlos Sainz, who retired on lap 1. Hamilton wins a 59-point lead with 4 rounds to go. You're going to COTA, which is Lewis Hamilton's playground. Vettel's got one of those wins in 5 races, but Hamilton has the other 4. There's 100 points on the table. You're going to need a DNF out of Hamilton, because even if he finishes 4th the rest of the season and Vettel wins out, I think Hamilton still claims this championship. I think that's how the points situation is right now, and it's that bleak. This is going to be tough for anybody to overcome, let alone somebody that's having mechanical issues at Ferrari, Richard, I'm sure you're with me on this one. I'm stunned to see the collapse of what's happened since the summer break. Like, I just don't understand where these things happen. I'm actually kind of shocked that Sergio Marchionne, the CEO of Ferrari, hasn't started imploding and taking people's jobs at this point.
Well, they've had today. I seen they've highlighted. They've hired a new quality control director, who's been involved in that Fiat family for a number of years now. It's often an area which in motorsport is often overlooked. The concept of quality control. You're reacting to situations so fast that, unfortunately, these things at times do get overlooked, and that's no excuse. It shouldn't be that way. Some pretty high up people within the Ferrari organization will be asking some pretty serious questions about what's gone on, and they've reacted quickly. Gone are the days where, out of a 16 season or 16 race season, if you finished 10 races, you had a good season. I mean, now out of a 20 race season, you've got to be finishing 18, 19 races. You can't have multiple DNFs, especially due to mechanical reasons, because nobody else does. It's such a high level. These teams aim for 100% mechanical reliability.
Do you think? I don't mean to cut you off, but do you think, because we've seen these issues happen in Vettel, it happened in FP3 in Malaysia, it happened after qualifying for Kimi in the lead up to the Malaysian Grand Prix, and then now we've got the spark plug issue. There's a part of me that wonders if they're just really trying to turn up the power in qualifying mode, and that's what's leading to these cracked headers, to these issues. Like the spark plug issue is obviously just kind of a weird situation, but trying to turn up that power so much because they do lack a little bit maybe in the chassis at places like Malaysia and places like Japan, because we all know that what Mercedes has is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a disability. I'd be lying to say it wasn't. I think that's definitely a case of that. Obviously, a little bit of what is maybe a little bit more concerning about this is because these engines are restricted now in terms of the modifications that the teams can carry out throughout the year. I mean, gone are the days where you could have a new engine specification 2 or 3 weeks in a row. The changes they made are all controlled and mandated by the FIA, so it does limit that. So these potentially aren't new parts that are failing. As you say, it could potentially be that they're failing parts which have expired, or they're pushing them too hard, which you really hope isn't the case, but there must be some reason behind it. But I mean, obviously Singapore was a driver issue and a race that they should have dominated and won. But as you say, you look at Malaysia and Japan, maybe there are events where they are down on power. But then you look at, I struggle with the concept of the power issue at Malaysia, because you look who won the race. Christian Horner's on his jumps on his soapbox again, and his latest thing to rant about is that they don't have the super power qualifying mode that the Mercedes and Ferrari engines do.
I do agree with that. I think that car is just aerodynamically better fit. I mean, you look at what he did through the first two sectors, Max Verstappen at Japan, and you see how much he got kept in the last sector. I think that's all you need about that aerodynamic package.
Or were they running more down course?
I mean, yeah, that's certainly.
This is one of the things that a lot of people get very, very spun out on the concept of that the Renault engine's slow and that the Honda engines are slow, and I'm sure there's a little bit of it there. But then you also go down the point of the teams aren't stupid; they know that they're power limited rather than aerodynamic limited. So what they will do is they will play up to their aerodynamic strengths and make a handle better in situations where they know they can take advantage of it. I mean, they will do simulations and the like for hours and hours. The supercomputers that these teams have access to now to do simulations on car setup is immense, and they will know exactly where their optimum setup is to optimize the tools they have available to them. So it may not be that the Renault engine is purely second a lap slower or whatever Christian Horner likes to comment on, and the Honda engine's 2 seconds a lap slower, the McLaren want to comment on it. It may be not as bad. It's just the teams know they can't get 100% out of it, so they will back it off and try and utilize other areas of the track to minimize the loss.
Yeah, seeing the power that Renault was pushing with Nico Hulkenberg for the early stages of that race, I can't say that Renault is that much down on power because he was running top 6 for a good while.
So again, that does put into question, some of Christian Horner's argument. Obviously, in qualifying, there may be something to that, this qualifying mode, but I'm a firm believer that you need to, especially in motorsport, you don't air your dirty laundry in public.
He sounds like the old Ferrari boss, doesn't he? Like, oh, we're not as fast as everybody, so we need more power.
Yes, it's sort of, and this again. I know I've mentioned this on the show before, but the guy that does the sort of pit lane interviews for NBC when I can't think of his name now, but I think
Buxton. Yeah,
very, very good. He asked Christian Horner a question of so what what percentages of your recent troubles are Renault's fault? And he said, 80% are Renault's fault, 20% are ours. Oh, good. So when you won those 4 world championships in a row, what percentage of that was Renault's fault as well? And he was a little bit. So it's a team game, and sometimes you have to work on this together as a team. You have a commitment and have an agreement to work together with your engine supplier. There's only 3 engine suppliers realistically out there that, I mean, in all fairness, there's only 1 engine supplier that Red Bull can go to. Ferrari aren't going to supply them. Mercedes certainly aren't going to supply them. Honda probably would have supplied them, but I don't think Red Bull were prepared to make that jump just yet. So in reality, they've only got one choice. And they can turn around and say, we're going to pull out of Formula 1 and all that sort of stuff. Well, great. Okay, if that's the way you want to do it, fine. Yeah. But get on with it and make it work. There's enough smart people within Renault and within Red Bull that they can make that relationship work. And you look at the gains that the Renault Works team have made this year. I know they've been recruiting heavily, and obviously they've put a lot of effort into their aerodynamic performance. But they're starting. Nico Hulkenberg starting to, and in all fairness, for most of the season they've been a 1-car team. Yeah. They're starting to push up there, and I think when Carlos Sainz gets on board with them next year,
well, Dakota.
Yeah.
I was going to say, this year.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and of course. I mean, what Red Bull have to be very, very careful of, and Honda have to be very careful. I mean, McLaren have to be very careful of it. Don't keep shouting about how bad the Renault engine is, because then when somebody comes up along and beats you in a Renault engine, it makes you look really stupid.
I don't want to look forward to Dakota until next week, because obviously there's no F1 races, but kind of furthering back on Japan, Esteban Ocon really impressed me, jumped up to P3 at the start and really held pat until, the chassis and just kind of the wear of the race wore down that Force Indy to where he kind of trickled down to 6th on the grid. Where Bottas and Ricciardo kind of came up and did what they did. I got to give I know y'all are probably going to think I'm playing favorites here, but I got to give an attaboy to Kimi Räikkönen because he went off track in the opening lap, battling side by side with Hülkenberg, falls back to 15th, and same tires that went off track, same tires that kind of got scuffed up. Started on softs when everybody else was on super soft, so not the ideal tire necessarily to start off with for pace, and just methodically makes his way all the way up to 5th. I'm a little surprised when they converted to super softs he didn't get higher up in the order to maybe challenge the tail end of the podium there just because of the pace he had on the softs. But nevertheless, given how crappy of a day it was for Ferrari, that was something to salvage because for 2 straight weekends, he didn't even get a chance to finish a lap. And he gets here, and of course, one of Ferrari's guys came over the radio and says, "Okay, Kimi, all clear to push." And he's like, "I'm pushing all the time." So, anytime they need him to get a result, anything to put him in a pinch, he always seems to put the drive together. Not bad for a 37-year-old in a sport full of 20-somethings that this is all going to a younger deal. So a shout-out to him. Valtteri Bottas, I really don't know what's going on. Ever since he signed that deal last year, or last month, that he hasn't put in quite the same results that were up to par. And I don't know if that's because Mercedes is putting all their eggs in the Hamilton basket now since the summer break. And these are all things we can throw to you, Richard, is are we running into a coming of age with Max Verstappen? He's gone from teen sensation to now this old and wise 20-year-old who puts together a first and second place and almost, if not for lap traffic, and that is something I wanted to touch on, was this damn virtual safety car. But if not for that situation at the end, he might have been able to bag Hamilton there and get his 3rd victory, his 2nd in back-to-back race weekend. So there's a plethora of topics for you, but overall, I mean, what do you take away from this whole situation this weekend?
Remember what you said. I'll go for the most recent one first.
Okay. Sorry, I just
no, it's all good. No, it's all good. On the situation with, I believe it was Alonso that blocked.
And Massa, that's Massa. He did it at Russia too when Vettel was trying to catch Lotus.
I think the situation with Alonso, I mean, Verstappen even turned around and said that he had blistering on his tyres, and even if he hadn't been held up, he wouldn't have been able to get past. And you have to also consider one of the charms now, and one of the great things about a circuit like Suzuka is it is an old circuit. It is a classic, for want of a better word, on the Formula One calendar now. And you look at the track, especially that stretch from like the hairpin through to the spoon corner. It's a very narrow piece of track. You wouldn't want to go side by side with somebody there. So I a little bit of that, but over the course of the season or over time, I think what goes around comes around, and I don't think Alonso deliberately blocked him. I don't think he deliberately got in the way, and I don't think from the comments that Max made post-race, and certainly Christian Horner hasn't turned around and said anything, which, that sort of silence is very loud on that front. I don't think that Alonso's supposed block was a huge issue. On the point you made about Verstappen coming of age, I think there's been a few people who have been a little bit disappointed with some of his performances earlier in the season. And you had that string of poor results, both reliability and running the road.
Running into his teammate at Hungary, sure.
Yeah, sure. Those sort of... and you're going to get that. You're going to get that, no matter what. I mean, when most guys are running in sort of Formula 3 and GP3 and F2, he's up there in one of the probably 6 prime seats in Formula 1. He's doing something right. And, again, the kid's going to make mistakes because he is a kid. I mean,
But when I look at this, though, because everybody was so quick at first to point blame with the Singapore crash that both Ferraris were a victim of, we're so quick to point to Verstappen. And Lord knows I wanted to do it too, because of this. He's notoriously big about opening lap incidents, right? So, yeah. But
And he did take out Kimi as well, so that's...
Yeah, there's a history. There's a definite history with him and Kimi. But I look at this situation though, and when he talks to Buxton, when he talks to other people, you see how his interview process goes, and he looks a lot more poised than he did maybe prior to the summer break. Less rattled for sure.
Yeah, there was that, and again, I think it's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, never mind the foreign language, but you have to understand a lot of the times that these guys, especially the young guys coming through, that they're being interviewed. They've just come out of a very tense and very, very stressful situation, sometimes for 2 hours in incredibly uncomfortable conditions, and then they're being asked high-pressure questions in something that isn't their native language. It can potentially come across a little bit not quite right, I think, and that's not trying to defend some of the comments that some of the drivers make at times, but I think sometimes people miss that and underestimate that. I know that it must be difficult for when especially if you've just been involved in an accident, you've had an accident with the driver, and you're it was your fault, you think it was his fault, sort of thing, and you're trying to get that across in a calm and accurate manner. And as I say, you're not speaking your natural language. That can be difficult, but I think you are right. I think, and also, hey, at the end of the day, the car's performance has improved, and his performance has improved as well. So I'm sure those things do go hand in hand when you look at his interviews and the way he carries himself in public.
Kind of moving forward on something that's kind of on the Verstappen subject, and this is the one thing that really ticked me off about the race, and it kind of go into that virtual safety car situation. A few years ago, the reason this virtual safety car came into play was a major reason that was because of the Bianchi crash at Suzuka. Now, that said, and there was people that make this argument that say, well, if we mandate a regular safety car, it takes too long to bunch everybody back up and to get everything situated, and it's going to take more laps. I look at this and I think to myself that that's nonsense. I think that if you are the FIA, if you're Charlie, you can come over, whoever's leading the race radio, and tell them to slow down to this, or tell the crews to whatever mode they need to be in under that rule to bunch everybody up. So by the time they come around for the next lap, the safety car does pick them up. Because when you look at virtual safety car, they're not backing down to the exact same pace they would behind a safety car. No. And they're trying to manage a gap between each other. And the thing that really, I look at Sunday, it was openly said that the two different virtual safety cars that we had, that Hamilton gained time under the safety car on second place by a collective 5-point-something seconds. Yeah. And number one, shouldn't a guy be penalized for that? Because we would penalize somebody else in the running order by something, but yet the leader is able to put an extra 5 seconds collectively, which could have decided the race. Honestly, at that point, when you look at the fact that this race was decided by roughly 0.8 of a second, and so there's that issue that I've got with it, is you're going to make the drivers manage a gap when let's be honest, they've got all these awesome gauges on their steering wheel that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they don't actually have anything to tell them the differential between car ahead, car behind. This isn't a video game. So when you look at that, you can't leave it in the driver's hand to throttle back or throttle up. If you can get somewhere, tell the safety car to manage that. I think that we're going to run into a situation where you could actually log the laps a little bit less, make it 3, because you also had a car that was still in a very unfortunate circumstance with Lance Stroll kind of being up there on the offset S's. And I think to myself, we're still using cranes, as if we didn't learn that enough from the Bianchi situation. So that was another issue of why are we going that speed when we got a crane out there? Did we not learn our lesson? And then lastly, and the less important of it, in essence, compared to the crane situation, would be the lapped cars don't become an issue of taking blue flags, because they're clearly, Massa and Alonso are battling for position whenever Hamilton's coming up through there. And you're going to ask Alonso and Massa, they're battling for the last point spot, very valuable from McLaren at this point in the season. You're going to ask them to kick to the side, and you're going to expect Massa to not try to pull a little bit of a gap and not pull over, because that's his job. I think by doing all that, It was less spectacular for the fans because there was kind of a situation where you just didn't allow the chance for an attack on a proper fight. And the other end of that is you really didn't give Alonso a proper fight with Massa whenever he was catching him. So, and this happened in Russia too. So this is something that's come up a few times this year, and I would hope that we would find a way to resolve it. I don't think the virtual safety car is the answer. I think that it was a nice idea. It was good to see how it worked. But if Japan's going to continue to use cranes over at Suzuka and going to be out on track, I think there is no way in hell we should run these cars even at half throttle, with especially in a place like that when it was so close to the track. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, my understanding, and it's a very vague, it's interpretation of the stewards at the race, or Charlie Whiting, I guess, is the so where the buck stops. But the consensus is if the caution, or the safety car is caused by a vehicle that is on the track, such as you saw with Ericsson at Singapore when he crashed on the bridge there. If physically the car is on the track, or marshals will be very, very close to the track edge, then it is a safety car. And the reason they'll do that is to give the track workers 2 minutes where they know no cars will be passing. And that is then deemed to be unfair on the race leader. If they've built up a 20-second lead and then suddenly it comes back down to zero because somebody's run out of talent, and I understand that aspect of it. The virtual safety car is, again, my interpretation of it, my understanding of it, is it's to be deployed when a car is not directly in the line of fire from a car spinning out and injuring potentially marshals or themselves, as we saw, as you say, with Jules Bianchi those years ago. The situation with Lance Stroll's car, he was on the inside corner. He was on the inside of one of the S's at the start of the lap. I don't think I've ever seen a car in that position before, and the only reason he was there was because of a mechanical failure rather than him losing control of the car. I think that the point at when the virtual safety car is released and how drivers react to that is very difficult, because they're trying to maintain those gaps, but then there's obviously going to be one point where you release the driver from virtual safety car, and he could be in the middle of an acceleration zone, and then you have somebody who's in the middle of a deceleration zone, and it's how do you react to that? That's the hard thing. So you have a balance there. Do you potentially unfairly penalise the leader who's built up a lead and then that suddenly gets taken away from him? Or do you try and neutralise the effect of that caution, or the safety car? It is a difficult thing. And is there a perfect answer? Probably not. I
will say though that Verstappen was only 1.4 seconds behind when that virtual safety car got in play, and whenever we went back to the start of this thing, he was 3.3 back. So in reality, you're not really penalizing Hamilton that much, because we know that whenever we have situations where you have the restarts after a safety car, that you're probably going to be within 0.6 to about 1.2 seconds behind going all the way down into turn one.
No, for sure. No, totally agree there. Totally agree. And I guess the days of drivers pulling out these 20-second leads that you've seen in the in the past are probably gone. You'll now see a driver get a 2 or 3 second lead, and he'll just go into protect mode and keep that gap. But how do you please everybody? You can never have a perfect scenario.
And I'm not clamoring for F1 to throw cautions. NASCAR throws cautions to every little touch of a wall that happens, and I don't think that would ever get to that point. But I think in terms of trying to, especially with Liberty Media kind of at the helm and trying to market the sport, especially when I look at the fighting that's being put on, like NASCAR's trying to make their shows better. IndyCar shows are what they are, which is really solid in their own right, and close racing where everything's within a second of each other. I think that this is a chance for F1, which is supposed to be the premier of motorsport, the pinnacle. Yeah. A chance for just a proper. We we've been asking and clamoring for a proper fight. And you give us these new rules and these new cars, and I don't understand why we get put into a situation like what happened on Sunday.
But, I mean, potentially, then you get the accusation. You know, you get the accusation of it is manipulating the race. You have a safety car situation, and you know, you could say, well, you know, if that guy hadn't crashed, Verstappen would never had an opportunity to attack. And the only reason he's ever been in that position is because of somebody else's issue.
You know, that's the way it is in every form of motorsports. A caution flag generally is brought out when there's an issue on the racetrack. You know, we can debate some of NASCAR cautions, but typically when there's an obstruction on the racetrack that is a hazard. Let's put it that way. When there is a legitimate hazard on the racetrack, the cautions come out, and it's a way to it should be accepted. It's going to re-rack the field. I don't care what the leader has driven away and built it up. It's just part of the race. It's beyond anybody's control, and it adds an element to the race. I think you've got, you know, that's just the way it is in racing. I think it's a part of that adds to the overall event. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Not a contrived caution.
That's American racing. We're used to the yellow bunching the field. Formula One has for years strived to maintain the gap you've built up. They say you've earned that. You shouldn't lose that in a caution. I mean, Joey, back before we had safety cars or virtual safety cars in Formula One, they used to have just a red flag, and they stopped the race to clean something up, and then you would have to try to watch this really confusing race where they use aggregate times.
Right, they added time at the end.
So
of
you
the
said,
event.
well, this guy was 5 seconds ahead, right, but now he's been passed. But theoretically, even though this guy is leading on the field,
right, he still might maintain a 3-second lead.
Because he's not 5 seconds ahead. The other guy, and there was actually a race, and I believe it involved Nelson Piquet and Alan Prost, where the guy that actually crossed the finish line second won the race because he didn't bridge that aggregate time gap, and that's for the spectator, that's got to be confusing. But I understand the sportsmanship of. You built up that lead. You earned it. So it's just the difference between European racing and American racing.
But here's the thing: they evolved and they learned from that, and they grew into something where now we have safety cars and virtual safety cars. And my point being, though, is like number one, Formula One had no business racing in typhoon conditions in 2014. That race should have been called either early or it should have been called for another day. We should have mandated things a little bit differently, and I'm sure everybody that was involved in the sport for that during that time period agrees with that. And here's the part that scares me, though, is that we can't, especially of all places at Suzuka, where, you know, this is where the tragedy happened. We are 3 years later. If we can't learn from that, then everything that happened in 2014 is senseless, because we don't have common sense to evolve with safety regulations. You want to talk about halo devices and put a halo on the car, and because it's supposed to deflect a bouncing tire and all that crap, that's fine. If you're going to do that, then maybe mandate it properly, or we don't have a stranded car literally like on the inside of a racetrack with cranes. And we all know that is really the biggest issue with what happened with the Bianchi situation. It wasn't that he went off course; it's the fact that he hit a crane that was on course.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, a simple tow truck would have done the trick.
We should learn from.
Absolutely,
we need to be better.
But I think you also have to take a little bit into consideration the circumstances of what we saw at the weekend. You know, if the situation you're referring to is that Lance Stroll situation, again, you know, to my point earlier, where Bianchi went off was, I think it was turn 5 at Suzuka.
Yeah.
You know, that is a fast left-hand bend. He went off on the right-hand side of the corner, aquaplaned, and hit something on the outside of the corner. You have to have, where you have a situation with no passing under the safety car or a virtual safety car, under what concept or what scenario of events would you have a situation where at reduced speed, which is limited, would you have a car being even remotely close to the marshals working on Stroll's car? If it was on the outside of the corner, where, yeah, you can slide off, I could understand that they'd look to put a full safety car out and limit the potential of that happening. But where it was, I think that the opportunity for a collision there was extremely low. And I'm struggling to understand in my mind how another car could get into that situation in dry, low-speed conditions.
Where I'm coming from with this is, we don't know. Stroll's had a mechanical issue, so who's to say that another freak accident doesn't happen? Because we all agree that the Bianchi incident was kind of a freak deal. But let's not forget that in the Bianchi situation, there was already a yellow flag for that sector, and it was taking those corners at your discretion. The same concept of a virtual safety car, where Hamilton is taking things in his discretion in terms of pace and widening that gap.
Well, there are limits, though. My understanding with the virtual safety car is the drivers have deltas which they have to hit, and there's timing that they have to adhere to. So the opportunity for somebody to try and gain, I mean, the idea is you don't gain or lose ground on it. Obviously, we've seen this weekend that maybe it's not a perfect scenario, but you're not going to have something. Now, Bianchi was at pretty much racing speed when he lost control because he was trying to catch up to the safety car pack. In this scenario, I struggle to see that would have occurred.
Let me leave this subject with this and ask you this. Do you believe that by removing a virtual safety car and going to a regular safety car with the deficit, because Verstappen was gaining, but with that deficit, with the lack of not having by having a proper fight potentially and not having lap cars involved and allowing Alonso and Massa to also have their own proper fight, do you believe that by calling out the virtual safety car and calling out a regular safety car would have made this race more compelling at the very end of this fight?
If I put my fan hat on,
yeah,
I'm going to say yes, because basically it's going to re-rack the field. You know, if you have a condition on the track where you need a virtual safety car, real safety car, whatever, there's a hazard on the track, deploy the safety car, freeze the field where it is right there. There's no overtaking. Everyone slows down when the full course caution comes out. It's going to bunch the field till they get it cleaned up. People can go to pit road. They can get tires. They can do whatever. They come back on the track where they come back on the track. When the track's cleaned up, throw the green flag and let them go back at it. From a fan standpoint, if I put my fan's hat on, that's what I want to see. You know,
I understand it from a sporting perspective, because certainly everybody wants to keep their advantages that they have and what they built up. But I just think that we're also here to put on a show.
Right, and it's natural. It's a natural, the way a natural race unfolds. Obviously, some Formula One races are going to go start to finish with no incidents at all, and there's going to be that. But there are going to be other races where there's going to be spins and crashes and things like that. That's a given in any form of motorsports, and I think that's what how that is the how the race unfolds. Each and every race is different.
So Gray's giving you the sort of fan hat. I'm going to give you now the sort of, I don't want to use engineer, but the work, somebody who's involved in the sport hat on.
But that's what say the caller hat.
Yeah, I mean, if you're investing hundreds of millions of dollars a year, you don't want the luck to come into it, and it will do to a certain extent in motorsport. Yes, I understand that part of it, but you know that if you develop the best car for that event, are a mistake of your own, you should be winning that race. And Formula One is very cut and dry like that. It's not like NASCAR where there's a large number of variables throughout a race weekend. Formula One is very, very cut and dry. If you go out there and you develop the best car with the best driver with the best strategy, you should win that race.
And I agree. That's the way you look at it.
Let me put a wrinkle in here though. So if that's Hamilton and that's Mercedes, because he's a four-time champion, three-time champion, however, driver limit your discretion. After the safety car is deployed, you have this, or it goes back in, you've got this certain range that you can decide to hit go on. it's kind of the NASCAR effect, so to speak, with this whole championship playoff. It's supposed to bring out the best, and you're still going to have the best driver win, whatever. I disagree with all that, but in a proper situation, in a race situation, with what you just described, how does that hinder Hamilton or Mercedes if they are in fact the best drive? They shouldn't have any problem walking away.
Because it's increasing the number of variables. You look in NASCAR. When is the caution most likely to happen? When another one's just come out. You saw in Charlotte last weekend. I think there was 2 or 3 cautions that came out within a couple of laps of the previous caution. Again, you want to reduce. It's all about reducing the variables, and this is a variable you want to try and reduce. And I understand it from a fan perspective, but on the flip side of that, one of the things growing up in Europe and watching European racing, NASCAR is almost mocked because somebody drop a sandwich wrapper and they throw a caution out. It was a gimmick. It was like,
and I agree. That's NASCAR's fault because they have done this. But I'm talking about basically. You're talking about from a business standpoint side, basically, you want to reduce the number of variables that can happen, so that your plan as you produce it goes forth through that race, and you don't have to worry about anything. That it's going to go as you planned that race, as you laid it out. The green flag goes, and you run the 2 hours or the advertised distance without issue. Yeah, I understand that. But there again, you're selling, like Joey's saying, you're selling tickets to it, and you've got fans in the stands.
Of course you are. Of course you are. But from a team owner's perspective, a Formula One race is like a business.
It's a business.
Output.
It's a business.
It's an output.
Yeah.
That's the product which you sell, and
right.
It's like if you're making cell phones or whatever. You put in the most R&D into your cell phone. You make it the best performing product out there with the best advertising and the best whatever else you want to call it. You want to sell the most of the products. If you make the best racing car, you want to win the race.
Right. I got you. I'm not debating that. I just, like you said, it's just the 2 different ways of looking at it, and we're used to what we've grown up with, in American racing, and that goes all the way back to the short tracks where we grew up on, the Saturday night short tracks where we ran, 50-lap features in either a full-bodied stock car or open wheel sprint car. That's the way the races were ran. When there was an incident on the track, the caution came out, the field bunched up, mess was cleaned up, the green flag came out again, and everybody went racing, and the chips fell where they may, and that's just kind of, I guess, just two different views of the sport. Yeah, and you can appreciate both. I mean, no doubt about it. I remember what Frank was talking about when they had the aggregate timing that they used to do, and it was confusing, but you understood why they did it, because the team had gone out and built up a lead. He shouldn't have to surrender that, because of incident on the track. Just a different form of motorsports, basically, and each to its own, so to speak.
Yeah, like I say, this been a great topic to talk about, and there's no easy answer for it. There really is no easy answer for it. Hopefully Formula One will look into it and come up with something that's palatable to both the competitors and the fans in the next couple of years. So Formula One, we've got a couple of weeks off, and then we're heading to, Joey, your home state of Austin, Texas, for the U.S. Grand Prix. You planning on heading out to the racetrack?
That is the plan.
All right.
Waiting on the FIA. Good times.
Good times, yeah. So, well, man, with that being said, let's just run around the table real quick, because we are in a green-white checker with a red flag. And let's get a final thought from everybody for the week before we reconvene next week. And I'll start with you, Richard.
Final thought. I mean, what do we... was a rather amusing video that got shared on Facebook today of an RC race trying to depict.
I saw that one. That was brilliant.
It could very, very well turn out to be like that. As much as super speedway racing can be fun to watch, it can it's from a team's point of view, working in the industry, they're terrible. They really are terrible.
Yeah, from the guy that got to fix the cars, right?
Well, yeah, because you know what, you put all the time and effort into wind tunnel work and engineering work to make these cars perform well in the draft and well out in clean air and all that. Forget it. Just turn up and race.
Oh man, Gray, what's your final thought for the evening?
Well, Talladega, wild card shootout like it always is, unpredictability, and certainly exciting. So we'll have a lot to talk about when we reconvene next week.
Fantastic, Joey. One final rant out of you.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to go into it because of how long we went into the virtual safety car rant, but I kind of implore Honda to put Pierre Gasly in that Super Formula race. He's second in the championship, half a point back. With Toro Rosso going to Honda next year, it makes all the sense in the world that Honda would want to have him kind of be the centerpiece to build around for that program. And I think that it would also be good because maybe we can get somebody doing a one-off that we're not expecting at COTA. I think it would be a proper thing for Gasly to have a championship shot. And it'd be kind of unique to see the storylines that could build out of whoever gets this one-off opportunity at COTA.
Yes, and from what I understand, it will not be Alexander Rossi, as was rumored. Rossi's people came out and said, no, there's no merit to that rumor. So, but my final thought for the evening is, we didn't touch on it, but the testing of the 2018 IndyCar is now out of the series hands and into the team's hands now. And the Penske guys were out there at Road America, running the new 2018 setup. And my buddy Simon Pagino shared a bunch of photos on his Twitter and on his Facebook page. So and he is his first time in the car, and he's just blown away and thinks it's the step in the right direction. It just seems like the new 2018 IndyCar package is just what the doctor ordered, and the more and more drivers that get behind the wheel of it are all kind of on the same page with that. So really excited for IndyCar 2018 next year. Now, IndyCar's schedule will be released tomorrow, which by the time our show airs, it will have been released earlier in the day today. We don't know what it is, but we'll talk about that next week. But until then, I want to thank you, Gray, Joey, and Richard. Love talking to you guys every single week. Seth, I know you're off for the week. Good luck to you. And to Whoobazoo Radio Network, thank you very much. Thank you to iHeartRadio, iTunes, and thank you to all you folks that tune in and listen. Talk to you in a week.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Whoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.